Hi everyone. During this lesson we're going to be focusing on some of the reforms that are beginning to take place, and more specifically looking at the different categories of economic reforms that are meant to be underway within China. Okay, now what I've tried to do here is really characterize these reforms under four different areas and then explain how they relate to China's 5-year plan, which of course we saw in a previous lesson. Okay, so the first area of reforms is internal economic reforms, which are characterized by the need to actually move away from old heavy industry manufacturing towards a more consumption driven economy. So for instance, if you look at the US or the UK, consumption represents a really high level and a high contribution to overall aggregate demand. Okay, so that's our first one. Now that relates to innovation, but at times these areas do cross over. So I'm just talking in broad terms, really. Okay, because there can be some overlap between the different policies that are highlighted on the 5-year plans. Okay, nevertheless, this component of innovation is about moving up the value-added chain and being able to produce really very high quality goods, as opposed to just focusing on normal sort of manufactured products. Okay, that will help to generate the internal market and make it more competitive as well, as we'll see as we break down these reforms later on. Okay, next point, external. And this is really China's desire to reduce its dependence upon the level of external demand. So for instance, if we go back to the global financial crisis, of course, the contribution of exports as a percentage of China's GDP fell significantly at a time where global gross domestic product actually fell. So what this means really is that they want to avoid too much reliance, too much dependence on external markets. Okay. Now, one of the ways that they're looking at doing this within the 5-year plan is opening up to more foreign direct investment, which would help to facilitate those technological and human capital transfers that we've talked about previously with some of the very first economic reforms that were put in place. Okay, under the special economic zones, but allowing more competition, and it's hoped that allowance of more competition and more openness to that foreign direct investment would help to reinforce the innovation taking place within the Chinese market and to really drive those firms forward. If you think about what we said about how China maintained their growth, they've maintained their growth through their internal competitiveness, through having an internally competitive political system, as well as their external competitiveness, which has been focused on globalization. But they are no longer the lowest cost manufacturer. There are better places to manufacture low-end manufacturing goods. So therefore, they need to ensure that they are offering really competitive domestic based products. Okay, so it's hoped that by opening up to this sort of trade, it subjects Chinese firms to the highest levels of Western goods and Western standards to ensure that they aspire to being more dynamically efficient, if you like. Okay, next one, of course, is the environmental reforms, characterised by the greening philosophy within the 5-year plan. So the need for China to adopt more sustainable economic practices, to move away from that heavy industry, as we said, based on the internal reforms, and towards more greener growth. If you remember, we've also, I think, discussed how the environment is seen as an area where China can develop a potential comparative advantage because they will be undertaking so much investment in renewable energy resources and so on. Further to this, we've also mentioned the need for greater urbanisation and that process to be accelerated, so that cities can be more efficient in the consumption of energy that is consumed. Okay. So yeah, that's our third one, and then we've got our fourth point, which is really addressing the Gini coefficient and the inequalities that have taken place in China as a result of the unbalanced nature of this economic growth. So trying to make the society fairer and balancing regional development to provide a fairer system. We looked within the 5-year plan about the concept of everyone as an entrepreneur and the creativity of the masses and so on. Okay, so trying to inspire even the migrant workers to really develop their own businesses is something that they're trying to do. Of course, it's very, very difficult when inequality is so high, but nevertheless, they're trying to reduce those barriers to entry and to help share the actual rewards for the economic growth at a far better rate than has taken place so far. Okay, so in our next session on this, because this is probably going to be one of about 4 lessons that we'll look at on some of the economic reforms. On our second lesson, we'll break down some of those economic reforms that are underway, see how China's getting on. Okay, thanks very much.